Have you heard about the 8-ounce challenge? It's a challenge using only 8 ounces of DIY paint. So I took the challenge using something that was not too special like this and a few products like these and created something beautiful like this. With the 8-ounce challenge, I was only allowed to use 8 ounces of paint, and so I measured out 4 ounces of Kissing Booth, 2 ounces of cake batter, and 2 ounces of Summer Crush. Here I am just putting the first coat of paint onto the side of this dresser. I had done the beginning part of the front, but didn't record it. So now I'm showing you just adding the first layer of paint. Very simple, just lay it down smoothly. I like to use a spray bottle sometimes, a fine mister to help spread the paint evenly, but it's just a simple coat. And because the paint is so deeply pigmented, it goes on very well and covers amazingly. So this is the blending part, and I find this to be a lot of fun. I like to use my Fine Mist spray bottle again. I usually have it in one hand and my paintbrush in the other. And while that area is damp, I add in some more Kissing Booth at the bottom, and then slowly I will add in my Summer Crush and my cake batter as I work my way up, but always using the spray bottle to make sure that the base is slightly damp. That way the paint will move much easier and the blending will begin. If you could see, I did spritz my paintbrush slightly to get that wet. I like to keep it nice and damp as it helps move the paint more evenly. This brush that I'm using is called the Extra Large Oval Brush by Farmhouse Paint. It is a very large chip brush, and I find it really is great for blending. It's not one that you would use for fine painting because it's a very uneven brush and bristle, but the natural bristles help really to create that blending look. So here I am adding some cake batter in, and I like to kind of go across in one direction and then go in with the spray bottle and then take my second color and add that in at the bottom. Then with the large brush, again, making sure that it's damp, I will blend them together, one direction and then the other. So I continue layering until I have good coverage over the original Kissing Booth color, blending back and forth until I get the look that I like. I also like to pay attention to where the colors fall in line, comparing it to the front of the dresser so that they can kind of match, and when you look from one side to the other, it all blends together nicely. So once I get the desired look I like, I'm going to add a little bit of cake batter up in the top area here, and then with my fine mister, I'll let that drip down through the different layers. And you can do this as much or as little as you want. You don't even have to do it if you don't want to. But I was going for kind of a chippy, rustic look with these colors and wanted it to just have some of that interest with the drips. Now you can let this dry totally like that, or you can go back in and blend a little bit once it dries. Here I'm using the IOD silicone blade, and I will also be using a putty knife, like a spackle knife, to make a couple spots of interest where I wanted it to look more chippy and rustic. You can see the darker spots where the paint has not fully dried yet, but as it dries, you can add these areas of interest by only putting a little bit of paint on the end of your spackle knife and just pulling it across and giving some rustic looks to the drawers and other areas of your piece. You want to make sure that your base coat is dry before you do this, or for the most part dry. Now on to the top. As you can see, I already did the first coat with the kissing booth, and I'm going in with my second layer. I'm down to a little bit left of the paint, but there's quite a bit in here, and you can reactivate this paint with water. So every time I spray that area with this fine mister, it just reactivates that paint, and it helps to spread just the whole top area and give it some more movement as I get ready to blend in the new colors. So I just keep going around. I'm going to actually blend in the middle since this is on the top. So I want to kind of create a circle or oval around the edge, and then I will add in the other colors. So here is Summer Crush, that's the next layer, and now I'm going to add in the cake batter. I am using two different brushes, or actually three different brushes for each color, but I'm also not too concerned if I get a little bit of one color in with the other because I am going to be blending it all together. So I'm down to a little bit left of each color, and it's working really great. I'm just going to wet that brush again as I blend them. And I have not washed this brush out the whole time that I've been using it. I just put it back into a Ziploc bag in between so that it doesn't totally dry out. But then I give it a good spritz before I go to the blending. This brush, as you can see, every once in a while you will get a stray hair from it because the bristles are natural. And so you just want to make sure that you don't leave them in your paint, but just keep an eye on that as you work with it. But it is a great blending brush. Look, I even have a little bit left, so don't worry, we'll be using that soon. So once the paint dries, I just take a very, very fine grit piece of sanding paper and just lightly sand to smooth off this area. This paint does not self-level, so it's a nice idea to just give it a quick sanding before I go in with my big top to put the top coat on. So here I'm just going to be using big top to go over, and as you can see, it really brings out the true color of the paint. When the paint dries after you've painted it, it turns to a really light chalky color, and it's not until you add your wax or your top coat that you really see the original beautiful color that this is. The pigments are just amazing in this paint. Make sure you go around all the edges so that you don't have any drips, and just check over to see if you've missed any little spots that still need the top coat. Okay, we're moving on to the transfers. So I added the first two transfers to the top of this. I'm just going to show you a little bit of this project where I'm adding the third page. This is a 4-page set called Elysium by Iron Orchid Designs. So what I did here is I'm kind of lining up where I want this transfer to go, and it's like a puzzle. The little leaves and different flowers all have an edge that will fit into each other, and you'll see it as you peel it apart. But what I'm doing here is I'm lowering the cover piece so that I can actually hold it up and fit it in exactly where it needs to go. But because I need to cut this to fit the drawer, I didn't want the whole thing to be uncovered because then it may stick to an area that I didn't want it to stick to. So I'm cutting it to the size of the drawer that I needed, and then I will remove the backing and then start releasing the transfer onto the drawer. Take your time while you're releasing these transfers, especially when it gets to the little delicate areas. You don't want to do it too quickly because it can release too quickly and then you may have a little bit of a breakage in your transfer. But if you take your time and just go slowly, it'll work great. So once the transfer is fully released, I like to use the sheet that it was just released from to burnish it, make sure that there's no bubbles or areas that were not fully adhered to the dresser. And then you're ready for your top coat. So here I'm using Big Top just to add a finishing coat over top of the entire piece. And what this will do will protect it from ever getting scratched or coming off. You always want to seal your transfer once it's adhered with a good top coat. Since I had a little bit of paint left, like I showed you, I decided to paint the sides of the drawers as well. And this was more of a wet paint. I really got the drawers wet first with my fine mister. Sorry, sorry the video is not the best right here because I kind of forgot that I was taping myself. But basically what I did was I wet the drawer sides first, put some kissing booth on in a very thin coat, and then added in the Summer Crush and a little bit of the cake batter and blended it again, just like I did the front of the dresser. But this time was a little bit of a thinner coat, but it still worked great just because this paint is so heavily pigmented. It just added a beautiful color to each drawer side. So after it was dry, I used a top coat and then I stamped with the Le Courrier stamp and Pennies from Heaven to give the sides of the drawer a fun look that pulled together the transfer from the front and the sides of the drawers. So what do you think? This brown piece of furniture went from this to something amazing using only 8 ounces of paint in Kissing Booth, cake batter, and Summer Crush, and of course the IOD Transfer Elysium. I encourage you to try the 8-ounce challenge. Get 8 ounces of paint and see what you can do. Use the hashtag 8-ounce challenge. If you haven't followed me on YouTube, I encourage you to subscribe.